Why aren't speakers designed to work close to the wall? This question, it's a great one. It's from Klaus in Bergisch Gladbach, Germany. Bergisch Gladbach. I hope I didn't butcher it too much, mein Freund. Nearly almost all loudspeakers are meant by its designers to be positioned more or less far from the rear and side walls to achieve optimal performance. That is correct. Physics, this is also true for the listener's position. Physics supports that. Unfortunately, most listening rooms, generally the living rooms in our homes, are far from being as big as they are in the USA. That's probably true. If one would follow these recommendations, most of us would end up sitting in the middle of our living room. No wonder that despite convincing arguments, the speakers and the devoted music lovers mostly are positioned relatively close to the walls. Is it possible, as very few designers try to achieve, to build a loudspeaker for near-wall positioning at all without losing too much audiophile qualities? One of the reasons I love this question, Klaus, is because that is a mission that I have decided PS Audio is going to take on head on. Now, we might fail, but we're going to tackle it because you're right. Very few people have dedicated listening rooms. Very few people have the luxury of being able to put their loudspeakers 1/3 the way into the room. Now, we don't recommend sitting in the middle of the room, and I know you were just exaggerating to make a point, but you make an excellent point. So, we're coming out with a line of loudspeakers, and they will be fashioned in many respects after the work of Infinity loudspeaker founder Arnie Nudell. And we're going to use a lot of Arnie's ideas, but Arnie never really had much desire to do what we're going to attempt. So this will be something different. We're kind of on our own. Now, Arnie liked dipoles, and my speakers are dipoles. Pretty much all the speakers that Arnie designed over the years had some dipole qualities, meaning the sound came from the front and the back. But one thing I will tell you, dipoles don't work up against a wall. Well, and the reason is fairly obvious, because if you're radiating sound equally from the back and the front, and you push it up against the wall, you're going to block that sound from the rear that you depend upon. So dipoles just simply do not work near the front wall. So let's talk about why loudspeaker designers prefer to have their speakers 1/3 the way out into the room, and that's where they sound best. And the answer is relatively simple. Rooms change the sound. These walls that we are near change the way things sound. And the nearer I get to the wall, if I get back here, you might even be able to, can you hear the difference in my voice just talking right here, and then I move away, and then you can hear it less? So as I'm talking, you can hear, and then all of a sudden, can you hear how the bottom end and all of that is like, up against the wall, mother? And here I am up against the wall, and hear how my voice is different than when I'm out here? It should come through. I mean, I'm hearing it, so I'm guessing the microphone's picking it up. So it changes the character of the sound. So if we're looking for a relatively flat frequency response, and we'll talk about that in a second, because we don't want a flat frequency response in our speakers. The flattest speakers in the world sound like crap. You don't want that. You want to be able to tailor the sound, but we'll talk about that maybe in this one, maybe in future ones. But if we just imagine for the moment that we want a relatively flat frequency response from our loudspeaker, then putting it up against the wall is not going to give that to us. And part of the problem is that as we're up against the wall, it changes rather dramatically. So how far from the wall does that happen, right? And how far from the wall are you going to put your speakers? Well, we don't know that. So it's always safer and easier to ignore the walls in the room, leave it up to the person to put them out in 1/3 the way into the room. In our new speakers, we are going to do some pretty interesting things to solve this problem. The worst bit of a speaker and its problems up against the wall, as you know, you can hear, I'm sure you can hear that as opposed to this, right? The worst problems come as the frequency goes lower, because the wavelengths get longer and they're bouncing directly off this wall. So as the frequency goes down, the problems get bigger. But fortunately, in our systems, from 500 hertz, and then it rolls off maybe through to 700 hertz, all the way down to 20 hertz will be amplified within our loudspeakers. And they will be done by two separate drivers, and we will build into that system digital signal processing, DSP, right? That will automatically adjust for the response that we want, no matter where you place them in the room. Now, this is nothing new. Most home theater systems, you set up your speakers wherever you want, you hit it with a signal, and it auto adjusts, right? So this is really nothing new. Now, they do it throughout the range, most of them anyway. But in audiophile speakers of the quality that we're talking about building, it's fairly rare that there is an auto-tune DSP circuit within the speaker itself. So that's the first step. And that's going to take a lot of work, because while it's fairly easy out here, it's going to be a lot harder through DSP to get it where we want it, and to make sure from 500 hertz on up that too is not going to be affected by the wall. The second problem that we have, and that's a fairly major problem, which we think we know how to solve through crossover design and through DSP, the other problem that we really have is depth. So one of the reasons audiophiles pull their speakers out from the wall is to provide space for a soundstage behind the speakers. And this is the big dilemma for me. I know intellectually that by carefully tailoring the frequency response, lowering it down in certain areas and raising it up, I mean, we're only talking about a couple of dB where you have to tailor it, we can add a lot of depth. But will we be able to get the kind of depth that I would demand as an audiophile, that I get with the Infinity IRS-5s and Arnie Nudell's reference system? Will we be able to get that same amount of depth, which goes back 20, 30 feet on some recordings? Can we do that? I don't know. But that is what we are going to find out, because I have every intention, if we can, of building our loudspeakers to be designed so that about 2 feet from the rear wall will be optimum for them. Wish us luck. Okay, thanks. Great question, Klaus. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye.